Last week, we explored with Chris and Stephen the first issue of the Leading Excellence book. This week, we're going to go deeper into Leading Excellence, exploring more topics of this book focused on helping organizations create cultures of continuous improvement and innovation. Without further ado, let's get to the episode.
Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence podcast, where we aim to help create a better future. Learn from our world's experts how to improve and create enduring, high-performance, low-impact enterprises. Learn how to enhance morale, customer and purpose centricity, focus, and calmness. Learn how to create and sustain a culture of excellence at all levels of your organisation.
Welcome to episode 180 of the Enterprise Excellence podcast. I have today Chris and Dargs back on the show with us to talk about the second part of the Leading Excellence book, which Chris and Dargs put so much effort into researching and writing to truly give us this new place of ideas and thought around the part leaders play to creating cultures of continuous improvement and excellence. Chris, Stephen, thank you so much for coming back on the show again today.
You're welcome, Brad. It's a real pleasure to be back.
Yeah, appreciate it. So, guys, in the last episode, we spoke about the low employee engagement levels at work globally. We spoke about this critical aspect being basically leadership behavior and what people experience from their direct leader driving a big part of it. Spoke about leaders who serve the growth of others and help others become the best they can. And the concept that to do that, you've got to be an adaptive leader because everyone's different and the context surrounding them can be different. And you kindly took us through the 5 hats of the adaptive leader, these 5 leadership skills and behavior that you guys found through your research and all the years of work you've done that are really the key hats that an adaptive leader needs to be able to wear. And Chris, you made a great point that in the one conversation, they may need to put on 3 different hats in that one piece. But we're going to go today, we're going to delve deeper into culture and a lot of the human behavior side of things. I just want to start off with yourself, Chris. In the book where we talk about a leader and how does a leader stay in thought, but also how do they lead culture, you mentioned this core belief system. Do you mind explaining what a core belief system is and how you came about with it?
Sure. We did kick this around for a lot and went through several iterations. We also had a lot of help from Dr. Mark Williams, who authored the Connected Species, who's kindly written a foreword for the book. And I think the best way I try and explain it is that human beings, we are first and foremost we are feeling beings. Okay, so we are feeling beings who have the ability to think, but in the most of the time, our initial reaction is based on our feelings and our emotions, and it's really helpful to understand that. Some people are better at it than others. Some people, like myself, really struggle with it, and our initial reaction to everything is emotionally. And so what we thought about was, how do we kind of do it? What can we do to make that easier for people? So there's a whole section in the book about how to understand your core belief system and how to build it. And for me personally, I realized it's very much based around some core values of respect and humility and trust, and really thinking about those deeply and what they mean, and really connecting it to, well, how does that help with my personal purpose? Because my personal purpose is to help people realize their full potential and help organizations to realize their people's full potential. So establishing that grounds you, I think, is a nice way to think about it. It grounds you in what are my core beliefs, and then we need something that helps us to pause between the emotional response and the thinking response, and that's where the hats come in, because the hats are the trigger that allows us to think differently. And that's so. Rather than jumping straight in with, it's like, hang on a minute, what should I be doing here? And if I can think, actually, this is a great coaching opportunity, or actually, this is clearly a direct opportunity, or, it sounds a bit artificial when you explain it that way, but as you practice it, it becomes natural. It becomes a habit, and you build it up fairly quickly. So that was the thinking behind the core belief. Understand who I am, understand what is it I really value, and then use the hats to help me to think about how I demonstrate that rather than just respond emotionally on everything.
Yeah, I can understand that, Chris. Like, emotions go too high, you're going to rapidly just go to behavior, and that behavior might not be the ideal behavior.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Now, on this topic of really understanding humans, you talk about the core belief system from a leader understanding themselves and also potentially understanding others by getting to that core purpose, core values. Dargs, you've got the high performance formula you've been, working on for a fair while, and you've brought that into the book. And I know from what I've seen, mate, it really ties a lot to this context discussion too, where, we need to look at the person and we need to think of the context surrounding them. Do you mind taking us through the high performance formula and how it relates to really looking at the person and then considering the context before we choose the hat to put on or the behavior?
Brad. Yeah, like it's the formula, and it's still evolving. Just to put that out there, we will learn, continue to learn as we go through the journey of continuous improvement, and we will refine the formula as we go. But it's something I've been working on for quite a number of years, and the formula started. I think I mentioned in the last episode there around Edgar Schein and the quote around creating and managing culture. The first component of the formula is around character, and you want good people on your team. You want people who have your back. You don't want white antlers. People who are going to be passive aggressive and behaviors. And I think there's a great one of the great leadership books, but one of my favorite leadership books is James Kerr, the legacy that the New Zealand All Blacks rugby union team and how they sustained a high level of performance over the number of years. But they have a wonderful principle, and excuse the term, it's called the no dickhead rule, right? So, and I think the Sydney Swans also have the same AFL team, they have the same. But what essentially that means is they want good people on their team. They want people of sound character. People are going to have your back. People are not going to backbite, or people are going to agree with you one minute and then have a water cooler conversation the next minute, disagreeing with you. So essentially, character. You want people of good character. The next component is behaviors and ideal behaviors, and the book will talk about a lot around ideal behaviors that drive ideal results. And we want people there with ideal behaviors that are going to drive the sustainable results through the organization. The next part of the formula is around vulnerability, and I'll delve a bit more into this particular one because it has a profound impact on me personally. So, and maybe the next episode we'll delve into the final component of the formula. But vulnerability came about when I was back in 2017, I think it was. I was going through an organizational op model change, and one of my executive coaches at the time, he used to say to me, he said, "Darg, never ever take a role because of title or money. Go to where you're most alive and tingling at work, and what if you could replicate that many times over? Go to where you're most alive at work and tingling, and what if you could replicate that many times over?" And what he was meaning was, go to where your purpose, go to where you have that inner feeling of fist pumping the air. Brad, when you get that feeling in work that you've just overwhelmingly yes, I got this. And you get that really warm, fuzzy sensation. Try and find what that connects you to, and what was that actually drove you. So whether that would be things like, solving a problem or seeing somebody develop through your coaching, or using the 5 hats and somebody starting to improve, whatever that is. But unfortunately, back then, Brad, I didn't listen to him. I didn't take his advice, and there was a role that was a general manager role, and I just saw the general manager title, and I just said I want to be a general manager, and I just didn't pay any heed to what he was saying to me. So anyway, I took the role, and it was a very challenging role. It was a new agile type organization where you had tribes and platforms, and you also had a distribution team. So I was the general manager of the chain function that sat in between those, the tribes and platforms and also the distribution. So I was like the goalkeeper trying to catch all the expedited, pace of change and make sure it was rolled out in a succinct manner for the frontline and distribution teams to be able to absorb. But over time, I started to really get, at work I was fine, Brad. I was like my leadership shadow was, nobody knew any different, but deep down I was paddling like a duck. I was coming home in the evening time and I remember just, falling asleep at the drop of a hat, sitting down, feeling lethargic. My wife was talking to me and I wasn't listening. It was white noise. My kids, even worse, my kids were talking to me and they were, a lot younger now. They're, mid-teens now or late teens, I should say. And they were talking to me and I wasn't at home. I wasn't listening. So I was getting out of bed in the morning, having to drag myself out of bed. And I remember going to play golf on Sunday afternoon. It was a beautiful sunny day in Perth. And those of you who know Perth, I was driving along. I live in North Perth and I was driving towards Cottesloe Golf Club and we drive along by the Indian Ocean with the turquoise blue waters. And those blue waters became very inviting, Chris. Almost had this overwhelming feeling of, I just want to end that fire. And I just wanted to drive into that ocean. Now, I managed to get myself to the golf club and I turned the car off and I rang my wife. And I just burst out crying at the time. And she, the lovely woman she is, she talked me off my perch and we agreed a plan. The plan was that I would go out and play golf and, come back that evening and we would sit and agree a plan to how we were going to approach it in work the next day. So we did that and the next day was a leadership team meeting and, the usual meetings, go around the table and or go around the stand-up or whatever it was and, how are you feeling and out of 10 and do the usual and got to my turn and I just said, put up my hand and said, team, I'm drowning. And I explained my scenario the day before, explained my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions. And I was expecting, I didn't know what I was expecting, Brad, to be honest with you. And I think what happened next really kind of enlightened me to this part of the formula. And it was almost like, when the minute I put up my hand, it opened that license for all the other general managers to speak up, but also they just stopped what they were doing. And the whole rest of the meeting was around, how do we help them solve your issues and make it easier for you, Darren? So we created little systems in place and tripods and, get-togethers once a week, so just to get it off our chest. But the more I started to speak about it across the organization of what that scenario and what happened was, the more other general managers and other people started to speak up and say, well, I'm actually feeling the same and I'm having the same quiet emotions. But then when I started speaking it to my team and when I took over a large contact center, I explained the story to the contact center team, or whatever it was, quite a number of leaders, 28 odd leaders and 34 leaders, I should say, and also a lot of frontline people. It was almost like, it was unbelievable, the difference. It was almost like they saw me as a human being and the performance all of a sudden lifted. And I was like, whoa, that's not just because of that. And then, it almost gave a safe place, that I was a human being and a safe place to speak up. And they worked harder, not because I asked them to work harder, but just because they wanted. They felt connected to me, I suppose. But it just helped that whole energy. And I think saying that, I've since spoken to quite a few people about that story, and a few people have resonated with it, including close friends of mine that are in very high senior positions. So I continue to promote the vulnerability side. We've got to be vulnerable. And that's the third component of the formula is that vulnerability. We have to have courage to be vulnerable as leaders. And vulnerability and humility are closely aligned. I believe you cannot have one without the other. So yeah, vulnerability is that component, Brad. And if we can get leaders to be vulnerable, and they don't always have all the answers. Leaders don't have all the answers, and that's okay. It's how we create the environment for the front line and again back to leaders who serve. Let them drive the business, and the leaders then start to support and develop their people to drive the business forward.
Yeah, thanks, Doug, and thanks for sharing that story and that tough time in your life, mate. You can see how this formula's come together from a real lived experience with yourself, mate, around character and then ideal behaviors and then the power of vulnerability. I know, mate, that the final part of the formula is interference. And I'm guessing, you know, you were going through a position of interference in a big time then, but do you mind, I might pass over to Chris to just come in on that interference bit, like some of the different elements of interference, external, internal, and Dargs, I'll get you to riff off that too, mate, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like, look, everybody, Brad, no matter who you are, has some sort of, you know, interference in the lives, I should say, whether that be intrinsic or extrinsic interference. And, you know, I think I mentioned briefly in the last episode, but, you know, internal interference or intrinsic interference is such as the things that people grapple with internally. It's you know, lack of self-confidence, lack of self-belief, lack of belief in their own, you know, abilities and capabilities, afraid to speak up, afraid to, you know, speak up in public, or you know, things that are mental health issues, well-being, depression. In my case back then, my internal interference was exactly as I was going through that spiral of self-doubt and you know, didn't believe that I had the right capabilities to be a general manager. You know, and then you have the external interference or the extrinsic interference, which is things externally that are driving the individual's behavior. That could be things like, you know, bullying, workplace bullying, financial abuse, domestic abuse. In my case at the time, I had my extrinsic interference, and you know, I look back on it now and laugh about it. But you know, I had a 16-year-old teenage son who was being very challenging for myself and my wife at the time. And those of you who have 16-year-olds or 15-year-old teenagers, you know, it can put a lot of pressure on a marriage. And you know, we were going through a tough time with him. He's come out of it now. He's a great kid, and he's come out of it as we always do. But that was my extrinsic interference at the time. But everybody has some form of internal or external extrinsic interference. So, you know, I think I also mentioned earlier on around the last episode around Edward Deming, never blame people, blame process, because 95% of the time people come to work each day to do a good job. So if they make an error or the behavior is not there, generally there's something going on, whether that be intrinsic or extrinsic interference. They could be, you know, their boss or somebody around them has just put immense pressure on them to do something and work, and that caused that behavior. So we just need to reflect as a leader and stand back and go, right, what is going on in this scenario here? Is it intrinsic or extrinsic interference? And if it's intrinsic interference, it might take a bit longer for the leader to uncover what that actually is. And there's a great case study story in the book around one of my previous leaders did this uncovering of intrinsic interference. I won't go into it now, but you know, it's one that it's a great case study, and it's something that leaders can definitely learn from.
Yeah, I think it's a good anticipation for people. It was a great story that I got to see, and I love that one too. So thanks, Dargs. It's such a cool, great formula. And for me, when you look at what you've written about with being an adaptive leader who looks at the person and thinks about the context surrounding them, that high performance formula is just such a great extension on that and so much more. So thanks, Dargs, for sharing, mate. Chris, in the book, you write about really leading from the front in a chapter and the concept of look, listen, learn, walks that I love, the language. Do you mind explaining, listeners, why you dedicated a chapter to that piece and then the concept of look, listen, learn, walks? Sure.
And actually, I'll just build on what Darg said, because actually look, listen, and learn is key to understanding interferences. Yeah, this is one of the, you know, we have to be prepared to really listen, otherwise we're never going to pick up those interferences. So one of the things that struck me a few years ago was lots of talk everywhere in continuous improvement and leaders about doing Gemba. You know, it almost become the fashionable thing to do. We've got to do Gemba, and I've got to do so many a week of these Gemba activities. And we ended up sending people out with targets to go and do 10 of these and tick the box. And I realized in many cases it's just missing the point. To, you know, be a bit provocative, but so I was actually teaching a class in New Zealand, and we were talking about this, and we were doing look and listen. I was calling them at the time. Go and look and listen. And there was a Maori elder in the class, and he said to me, he said, "Oh, what you're really saying is we need to look, listen, and then learn about what we've heard." And I said, "Yeah, we do. Yeah. That's brilliant." So I stole it, and with his permission. And I said that, because actually that gives it a clear purpose. We've actually we're doing this to learn. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm going to look, and it's not just walks, we call it walks, but it's just talking to someone and look, listen, and learn. And it's like the look, listen, learn activities. I'm going to look, I'm going to listen to what people are saying. I'm going to listen to what's happening. And then I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn not from the perspective of what have they got to do better, but from the perspective of what have I got to do better. I want to give you an example. Is a classic activity might be I'm going to go and see if people understand the purpose of the organization. I might just ask them, what are the goals? How are you achieving them? Now, one way you could look at that is I'm doing that and I'm testing them, and that's often how it'll come across. But what we should be doing with look, listen, learn is I'm really learning. The reason I'm asking those questions is I want to learn is the way that we've done that and the system we've used, has it been effective? So I'm learning about how well what I've done has worked. That's why if they can't tell me what the purpose is and how they connect to the goals, that's not their fault. That tells me I've not done it well enough, and there's potentially an issue with the system, and I now need to decide which hat I'm going to use to help them to understand it, and go back and learn about what we need to change to make it better. So it links very strongly into humility. I don't think you can do a good look, listen, learn activity without a humility hat on. And I also fully agree with Dargs is you've got to be a little bit vulnerable to open to the fact, actually, I probably messed that up. I didn't do it very well, and that's why they don't understand it. So that is the key to look, listen, learn. What have I learned? What am I learning about what I'm seeing, and what am I learning about myself?
I love too, Chris, how you connected that look, listen, learn activity to then the adaptive leader, using that learning to go, okay, how do I best show up here? Which hat? What approach do I take to help that person grow and help the system work? Brilliant. Dargs, in another part of the book, you write about really, I think you call it nurturing the trees and growing talent through your organization. Like, why is it so important in leading excellence that we really consider growing talent and capability within the organization, particularly from a leadership sense?
Well, for me, Chris, or Brad, and Chris, and the three of us have spoken quite a lot around leadership development and developing people. As I think I said before, that the only asset that has the infinite capacity to appreciate and value in the organization. So how do we actually start to develop and create people with the right mindsets and behaviors and character through the organization? So when you see really strong development systems in place, and you're developing your talent through the organization. The example I gave was a contact center. And generally contact centers, Brad, are the entry-level roles in most organizations, and they're sometimes seen as a second-class citizens, and so to speak, in the organization. But yet they speak to probably the most number of customers every single day. So how do you start to create a really strong culture of development? And how do you develop people through that system of the entry-level role right through the organization? We see this in mining, where we don't have, we have hard to fill roles across different crews and maintenance crews and production crews, because we're not identifying talent from the entry level and have really strong development pathways. So in the book, we talk a lot around how developing those pathways for individuals, as well as developing leaders, because if you can develop leaders with the 5 hats in mind, and have the capabilities, to go and understand people's intrinsic and extrinsic interference and create a culture of high performance and psychologically safe place to speak up. Overall, the whole organization will shift. Now that takes time, Brad. It'll take many years for you to develop that talent pool of leadership coming through. But there's a handy tool in the book, the Leadership Talent Matrix, which is a really cool routine meeting or routine, whatever you want to call it, that you could do each quarter with your leadership team to really try and identify those up and coming leaders and how do you develop with the right skills and attributes and character and behaviors through your organization. Again, that's the humility piece around the leaders. You're going to be potentially creating leaders that are going to be 10 times better than you will ever be. But to me, that's my purpose, right? And that connects. I think that's Chris's purpose as well. The overall organization and the customers and shareholders will benefit overall.
It's massive, and I got to admit, Doug, I see so many organizations where they'll have hundreds of employees, but they keep hiring leadership from external, and you sort of think, surely in that hundreds and hundreds of employees, there's some leadership talent potential in there to grow. I don't know if you see the same, but it's unbelievable. It just can't be.
Absolutely. And that's where this talent matrix will really help you as an individual or a leader. How do you really start to identify those potentials and bring them through the matrix and bring them through the maturity of being a leader with the right skills and capabilities and behaviors, that we speak about in the book.
Yeah. Well, I love, guys, written a book that is core to really, I guess, creating a culture of continuous improvement and innovation. And I love the topics that you've covered. I know there's so many case stories and great examples in there that people can read about and learn from, apart from the ones that have covered today. Chris, just for yourself, mate, for a leader, of course, would recommend a leader to get the book, but what would be your enterprise excellence or leading excellence 2-minute tip around this concept of leading excellence and the adaptive leader, the 5 hats of the adaptive leader?
Really to think about people as people. Think about how do I help to create an environment where people can thrive, and how much a phrase we haven't mentioned so far in the podcast, but we use it a lot in the book, is the leadership shadow. So really think about what's the shadow I'm casting, and is that a shadow that I'm proud of?
Yeah, too true. Thanks, Chris. And Doug, the question I got for you, mate, like, I know that you've been through a massive exploration of data and knowledge and research to be able to develop this book. But what's been the biggest insight for you through the whole journey of, really developing this book, Leading Excellence, the 5 hats of the adaptive leader?
Oh, for me, like, leadership is a privilege, right? It's probably one of the most if you're a leader that is vulnerable and leads with humility and has the 5 hacks that they use day in, day out, it is incredibly rewarding as a leader, because you have the profound ability to impact the lives of not just your employees, Brad, but your employees' partners and kids and uncles and aunties, because your shadow, as Chris mentioned, casts a very wide net. So I think Chris mentioned it in the last episode around the percentages of engagement from your leader is equal to that of your partner. So, you have an immense ability to impact positively the lives of hundreds, if not thousands, of people. And that, to me, is the most rewarding thing. It's one that I'm very proud of. And I think if you're a leader and you can think that way, you can go on to do great things and help lots of people in their careers and their families and what have you. So it goes beyond just that leader, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Doug. It's truly creating that better future. And Chris, how can people get hold of the book or connect to gain more information about the book or other content?
We've got a website, leadingexcellencebook.com. Great source for resources. You can buy the book through links on there. You can order it direct from ourselves if you want large quantities. And we've also building a portfolio. We had so many case studies. The book has already got like 30 case studies in it, and we couldn't put everything in there. So what we're going to do is have extended versions on the website, so people can access those as well. And the book is also going to be available from BookPod to order online and from Amazon, and there will be an ebook as well. All of that should be out in August.
Nice. Well, Chris and Dargs, mate, thanks for all your efforts and everything you've done to share knowledge in the show, but also through the book. And thanks for helping us create a better future, guys, and living your purpose. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, bro.
Cheers, guys. Bye from now. What a great episode. It's so good to be able to chat to my good friends, Chris Butterworth and Stephen Dargan, on this book we put so much effort into, and we really know will revolutionise organisations' approach to transformation and truly creating that better future. Remember, you can go to the website leadingexcellencebook.com to get hold of additional resources, also look at events coming up, and also get links to purchase the book, some good pricing. There were 2 key takeaways for me from this episode. Firstly, the high performance formula. Stephen Dargan's done such an amazing job leaning into that formula and really looking at how do we create high performance in an organisation through the way that we show up and look after ourselves as leaders also. The other key takeaway for me was the power of the look, listen, learn walk. Really getting out to the workplace, looking, listening, asking great questions and listening, and then learning from these interactions to then think, right, what behaviour or even belief can I lean in on to truly help create better outcomes and serve these that I'm seeing to help them grow. And that could be as a senior leader, that our focus is to actually go and coach and support leaders below us to then cascade a better leadership shadow or an improved leadership shadow down to the front line. What a great episode. It was so great being able to record this with the 2 guys. Really appreciate all the effort, guys, over the last 2 years, and it's such a great thing to have this book out now. Thanks again, listeners. Bye for now.